Hi everybody and welcome to today's video. Today is a video I've been planning for quite a while. This is an overview of a bunch of different types of paper, discussing whether they are fountain pen friendly. Now all of these papers, most of them, claim to be fountain pen friendly. So what I've done is I've taken a whole heap of different sorts of paper from a range of different brands, some brands represented by different paper within their ranges, and I've done a standard set of sort of writing tests on them. I'm going to show how fountain pen friendly they are, give them some scoring, do a little writing sample on each using my Parker Dual Fold with a medium nib and Simplicity's Violette from Ackerman as the ink. So just a sort of a basic standard writing experience. And we can then just see how fountain pen friendly these papers actually are. So let's start here with sort of one of the gold standards, the Rodeo dot pad. So this is the 80 GSM dot pad, and what I've done on each of the paper is with a fine, medium and broad Lamy Safari inked with Waterman Blue. I've done with all of these a little swatch and then a little crosshatch. I've then taken a Visconti Homo Sapiens with a fine nib with Mont Blanc Beetles Purple, a medium fine writing brass Fine Writing International Brass fountain pen with Diamine Aurora Borealis. Now that is a standard Yovo medium nib. And then a broad TWSBI Diamond 580, which is very wet with Noodler's Heart of Darkness. Then further down, I've got a Rollerball Retro 51, a ballpoint from Lamy, a highlighter, a Sharpie, and a black ring. Then I've done BSB for Bay State Blue, just to see how that works out on the paper, and a swab there of Monteverde California Teal. Now we should be able to see through that if there's sheen on the paper. Then I've done a little scoring, which I'll get to in just a second. So, looking at this, we can see here that, there's very little feathering. If we turn it over, there is a bit of bleed. Now, this is Rodeo dot pad, the 80 GSM, and the TWSBI Diamond 580 has come through, but not a lot else has really come through. Here is a standard piece of white copy paper, just to see the colour of the paper, because there's a range of ivories and creams and whites and things amongst all this, just so we get a sense of what it is. That's quite white, which is nice. This is the dot. As I'm not going to review the books they come in or talk about the lines and dot grids and rules and all of that sort of stuff. It's just about the paper and the paper quality for fountain pen use. So with this Rodeo dot pad, what do we have? Smoothness. I've given it a 7. It's quite smooth. Sheen 5. Very little actually comes up on this paper. Get a little bit of halo sheening, and that's about it. Colours, they look great on this, I've given that an 8. Then the actual performance, feather 9, bleed 7, ghosting 7, and an overall of 7.5. So you can see that some has come through, Sharpie comes through of course, but generally it performs pretty well. Let's do the writing sample. So I'm just going to write, quick brown box. That's all we need to do. A little squiggle, a crosshatch, and we'll do a wetness as well, just while we're here. So this is a coated paper, and you can see there that the ink, it dries fairly quickly, but nothing sort of comes through too much on there. And yeah, this paper performs really well. There's a reason why it's sort of like one of the international standards. So yeah, that's the Rhodia 80 GSM dot pad. Next one I have here is another Rodeo. I've got 3 Rodeos to start with. This is the Heritage paper, which is 90 GSM. Now you can see there's actually a tiny bit of feathering that sort of occurs with this, and the bleed is quite heavy. There's no sheen. In fact, it's actually a lot more sort of a matte sort of finish. Bay State Blue comes through. Everything else sort of performs fairly well. Smoothness, I've given this paper an 8. It's actually a little bit smoother than the regular Rodeo. Sheen is 0. Colours 4. They do tend to sort of be a little more dull on this paper. Feathering 6, bleed 4, and ghosting 5. As you can see, sort of a lot comes through. So I've given this a 5 out of 10 for fountain pen friendliness. The last Rodeo paper I have here is from the Web Notebook. It's once again, it's 90 GSM. Smoothness 8, sheen 4, colours 6. They do tend to look a little better. This is like, in terms of the colour, it's similar to the Heritage, just a little bit sort of lighter, not quite as yellow. Everything sort of tends to perform quite well. Very little feather and bleed and all those sorts of things. A little bit of bleed here and there where the ink pools, particularly from the wetter pens. but generally I have to say that performs fairly well. I'll just go back and go through the writing sample I forgot here. So this is on the heritage paper. You know, it actually feels nice to write on because it is quite smooth. It just doesn't perform as well as sort of the regular Rhodia dot pad, but because it is smooth and it is, you know, you do get a nice sort of writing experience. But even there you can see sort of some does come through on the other side. Now with the web notebook, I do like the paper in the web notebook. The 7.5 overall score there I think is quite fair. So again, there's not a lot sort of coming through. There's a bit of ghosting, but really not a lot comes through. Now we're moving on to paper from Rollbar Delfonics. So I'll start with scoring. Smoothness I've given a 6. It's not super smooth. Sheen is a 1. There's really nothing that sort of works there. Colours 7. I think they look pretty good. They look pretty true to the actual colour that the ink is. By the way, this ink here is done with a TWSBI Diamond 580 medium, and it's KWZ Grapefruit. And that up the top there is a Lamy. Each one is labelled with a Lamy 2000 with Diamine Oxford Blue. So looking at the back, sort of quite a lot does come through. You know, like you expect that TWSBI is quite wet, so that's going to come through a lot of things. But yeah, it performs okay. So feather, I'll give it a 7 because there is a tiny bit occasionally you can probably pick up. Not a whole lot, but like if you look around, you know, the D there, we get a little bit of feathering and stuff like that. Bleed is a 5 and ghosting is 5, so an overall of 5.5 for the Rollbahn paper. Now Fabriano paper, this is from a milligram notebook I quite like, and I think the colours sort of look pretty good. I've given that an 8. Sheen I've given a 3, there's not a lot sort of going on there. Smoothness is a 6. Once again, it's nice and it's relatively smooth, but it's a bit of tooth on it, which is actually personally my preference. This is 85 GSM paper, and as you can see, everything sort of tends to look quite good on there. So I've given smoothness a 6, Sheen a 3, colours 8. Feathering I've given an 8 because it does perform well. Bleed I've given a 7 because, like, if we look at it in terms of like ghosting, there's a little bit, and as I said, I've given it 7. That's probably a bit generous, but nothing comes through in terms of the bleeding, apart from, you know, where we put the swab and base date blue, of course, which is going to come through anything. So, live sample. You can hear that feedback, and it's not the coatiest of paper. So the ink does absorb a little bit quicker into this, but it does look good. I actually really like how ink comes up on this paper. So 7.5 for the Fabriano paper, here used in a milligram notebook. One of my personal favourite papers is Apica. This is around 80 GSM. It's not really 80 GSM. The colours look great. The performance of that paper is outstanding. Everything sort of tends to perform quite nicely. There's a bit of sheen, which is great. And so I've given smoothness a 9. This is really smooth paper. It's nice and waxy sort of coating. Sheen I've given a 7 because it's actually one of the higher sheening papers. Colours I've given a 9. Now feather, 10. Bleed, 9. Ghosting, 8. So an overall of 9 out of 10. I'll show you the other side first, so you can see like nothing really comes through there at all. A little bit from the swab, of course, but like you can easily use both sides of that paper with a fountain pen. Here is the live sample. Yeah, very smooth, and the ink does take time to dry on this paper because it is nice and coated. but it just performs so well and it feels lovely to write on. It's super affordable as well. Like, these books are really well priced. I think this is one of the best fountain pen papers on the market, personally. Next, we have a page from a Leuchtturm 1917. So you can see the colour there, off-white. This is 80 GSM, and everything sort of does perform quite well on the surface there. Rollerball looks great. Tiny bit of sheen again. And then I've given smoothness 7, sheen 7, and colours 7. So feathering, I've given an 8. Really, that's pretty well performing paper. Bleed a 9 and ghosting a 6. So you do see through this paper. It's part of the problem with Leuchtturm in these notebooks is that the ghosting is quite apparent, but little actually really comes through, which is awesome. Okay, let's write on it now. So there is tooth on this paper. I've given the smoothness a 7, but there is, you know, a bit of feedback on the page. Dry time is sort of quite fine, not the super, like, not the least resistant paper in terms of ink, but yeah, it performs very, very well. 8 out of 10 for the Leuchtturm 1917. Next, we have a page from a Midori Traveller's Notebook. This is 80 GSM once again. I think this actually works really nicely. The paper is great. Midori make nice paper. Everything sort of works well. There's a tiny bit of sheen there. So I've given smoothness an 8, sheen a 7, colours an 8. Feathering, I've given an 8. Bleed an 8, and ghosting an 8, so an average of 8 out of 10. The paper does perform really nicely. You can see the sort of vibrancy of those colours. It's nice. And how does it form on the back? Well, look, there's nothing. Like, even the swab gets very little actually comes through. Base 8 blue performs better than on a lot of paper. It's good. So I don't think you really have much to complain about with this paper. It's got a pretty decent dry time. It performs really, really well. Yeah, so an 8 out of 10 for the Midori Traveller's Notebook paper. Now we get two Tama River papers. Now I'll bring these up at the same time. So we have both the 52 GSM and the 68 GSM. My preference is the 68. And although the 52 is really great, we'll start with the 52. This is very light paper, but as you can see, everything performs beautifully on it. Absolutely everything. There's sheen, look at that. See, that's why you use Tama River paper. So I've given smoothness an 8, quite smooth. Sheen is a 9, of course. Bang, look at that. Colours a 7. The only thing that tends to happen is that sometimes inks will look a little bit dull on this paper. You can see from the Aurora Borealis there that the green isn't quite as vibrant as, say, here's the Traveller's Notebook. You can see it's a slightly different green. But yeah, so feathering is 10. You're not going to get any feathering on this paper whatsoever. Bleed is a 9, like nothing at all comes through, just the swab and base 8 blue and Sharpie and things like that. The Sharpie is an alcohol-based marker, so that's going to come through a lot of things. But ghosting is a 5. It just comes through. You could almost read that perfectly through the other side of the page. We'll do the writing sample while we're here. It is lovely paper for fountain pen use. It's, it allows for the colour to sort of mostly be quite nice, sheening. Ink takes a bit of time to dry on it, but it's just absolutely lovely. And when you get a notebook of this, you can, because the paper's so thin and so light, you can get a 500-page notebook of this without any problem. And yeah, you might not be able to use both sides if you're concerned about the ghosting, but you're not going to get bleed. And then the 68 GSM, it's the same sort of performance. Colours look good, no feathering, there's no bleed through. You get a bit of sheen, everything looks good. Smoothness is an 8, it's not really, maybe it's quite as smooth as the 52. Sheen is an 8, and the colours I've given a 6. They just do tend to sort of be a bit more dull. Feathering is a 9, bleed is a 9, feathering is a 10, bleed is a 9, and ghosting is 6. It's not quite as, you can see a little less through the page, it's just that little bit thicker, which is handy. And so overall I've given this an 8.5. Let's do the writing sample. So this is really nice paper to write on. I do really enjoy the 68 GSM Tama River paper. I think there's a nice sort of, it just feels a little bit more robust, being that slightly heavier paper. You know, the 52 is so light, whereas the 68 is just that little bit sort of, yeah, robust perhaps is a good way of putting it. But no, everything performs nicely. Tama River is held up as the almost the gold standard for fountain pen use for sure. Next is a relatively new entry in the market. It is the Lamy notebook. This is 90 GSM paper, and I think it performs really, really well. It's an interesting line, well, I will say that. So, you know, everything performs nicely. There's sheen on the ink, particularly halo sheening. Shading isn't as apparent. I think it's slightly more absorbent paper. But I've given smoothness an 8, sheen an 8, colours an 8, then feathering a 7. If we look, I think there are hints of feathering occasionally, or at least spread. Bleed a 9, and ghosting an 8, so an overall of 8 out of 10. If you look at the reverse, you can see there's so little that actually comes through, and in terms of ghosting, that's pretty good. Yeah, a nice paper, and it's quite a sturdy paper as well. It does feel nice to write on. It's got a little bit of, it's smooth, but there's like a slight tooth to it that just lets you know you're writing, which I think is quite nice. But as you can see there, like, I'll do another one. The ink absorbs into the paper quite quickly, so the dry time is pretty good. Next, I have a controversial one. This is a Moleskine paper, the 70 GSM, not the premium, this is the standard, as what you get in most planners and things like that. Let's look at that. There's feathering, there's insane amount of bleed, there's no sheen, everything just sort of eats through, even the rollerball comes through. Like, that's a bit, you can't call this paper fountain pen friendly at all, I don't think. So smoothness, I've given a 7. It actually is quite smooth paper, it's nice. Sheen is a 0 and colours are 2. They just look like, no, just no. Feathering 0, bleed 0, ghosting 0, so 0 out of 10, because you cannot call that. That is high feathering, that is high spread, that is high bleeding, and even where it doesn't bleed, everything sort of just comes through as ghosting. Like, you can see it, it's just all there. So let's do the writing. Yeah, it's just, like, it's not an unpleasant paper to write on. It's quite smooth and it feels nice, but, like, for a relatively slow dry time, there's just feathering and spread and everything just sort of looks dull, and it sort of eats into the paper, and, you know, yeah. The premium paper is better, I just didn't have any on hand, but in terms of their standard paper, definitely not fountain pen friendly. Next I have one of the standards again. This is Fontaine paper, 90 GSM. As you can see, everything looks good, no feathering, virtually no bleed. Everything looks nice. There's a tiny bit of sheen. I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick that up, but tiny amount. does look a bit dull, but that's okay. Smoothness, I've given a 10. This is beautifully smooth paper. Smooth to the point where sometimes if your pen is too smooth, it will not write. Sheening, I've given a 3. It's a bit dull, yeah. Colours are 9. They look good. Feathering, I've given 10 because, let's be honest, there's none whatsoever. Bleed, I've given an 8 because only apart from the Twisby there, everything sort of performed quite nicely. And ghosting, once again, an 8 because slightly heavier paper, low ink resistance. It does, you know, quite nicely work on both sides. Let's do the writing sample. This really is lovely, lovely paper. It is super smooth. It's super nice to write on. The inks perform nicely on it. I really don't think, and it's nice bright white as well, which is nice. I think it's a win. Like really, I think you can't complain about this paper. Fontaine, and you can get it in many formats and at affordable prices and all that. So giving it 8.5 out of 10 there, it's a really lovely paper. A personal favourite of mine is Baron Fig paper. You can see it's an off-white. It's toothy. Smoothness, I've given it a 4. It is toothy paper. I quite like that. It doesn't sheen, but colours look excellent and vibrant. Let's take once again, for the sake of the exercise here, the Traveller's Notebook paper. And, you know, the colours look excellent on this Baron Fig. Really, really excellent. If we look up close, there's no feathering, perhaps a tiny bit of spread, but not enough to warrant any issue. Bleeding is pretty good, like for the most part, that's pretty outstanding. And ghosting is a 9, like, you know, virtually nothing comes through. I love these Baron Fig notebooks. They are one of my absolute favourites. So 8.5 out of 10. And let's see the live writing sample. I adore this paper. There is a tooth on it, you can hear that. But I really think, and it's got a relatively quick dry time as well, which is really handy when you're journaling and things like that. You can turn the page and actually write relatively soon afterwards. But everything is nice. It performs really, really well. Baron Fig, for me, is one of my top picks. Next, we have Optik's paper. This is taken from a black and red notebook. It's 90 GSM. And once again, everything performs. This is a really nice paper. It performs really well. There's a bit of sheen there, which is great. So I've given smoothness a 9. Once again, it's a really smooth paper. Sheening a 7 and colours an 8. And then 9s across the board for feather, bleeding and ghost. So 9 out of 10. If you look at the reverse there, like, that's one of the best examples you'll see of no bleed and no ghosting. It's really quite a good paper. And once again, affordable. I think Oxford used this paper, but the brand, the actual paper itself is called Optics. So here is the quick brown fox. Lovely paper to write on. It's smooth, you know, inks look great. There's shading, there's sheen, you know, it allows for nice sort of wet ink. There is a bit of a slower dry time, but it's okay. But you can see there the writing holds up really, really well. Really well. Optik's paper from Oxford Black and Red Notebook. Yeah, 90 GSM. Another really nice paper. Not spoken about enough. The last paper today, the last paper, finally, is Maruman from a Nemesis notebook. Very smooth. 10 out of 10 for smoothness. 8 out of 10 for sheen. 8 out of 10 for colour. Feathering, 10 out of 10. Look at that. Crisp, clean lines. Beautiful. Bleed is a 9 and ghosting is a 9. You know, that's once again another great example of, you know, what to look for in this sort of paper. There's a bit of sheen there, as you can see. That's lovely. Once again, available in a wide range of formats and everything. Japanese paper, just really, really nice. Sorry, slight technical difficulty there. Let's just pick up with the writing sample. Super smooth paper. The only thing I will say is this is another one of those papers where if your pen is too smooth, and if you get any hand oil or anything on this paper, it will be tricky to write with. In fact, I found that in some of the samples that I wrote here, sometimes the pen just takes a little bit to sort of actually get going. Hard starts on this can be a little bit more apparent because it is just so smooth. It's another one of these waxy coated papers, but it is just so lovely and the performance is so good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say what my top 3 fountain pen papers are for me. Now, highly recommended or highly commended, whatever, I'm going to say is the Baron Fig. A lot of people aren't going to like this because it's not the smoothest paper. But I think it's a really beautiful paper and it does perform so well. Now, everyone says the gold standard is Rhodia, and they make a good point. The Rhodia 80 gram dot pad performs well. The paper, the ink looks good on it. For the most part, it performs really well, and it's super widely available and super affordable in comparison to, some other brands, let's be honest. Not perfect though. So what are my top 3? Well, I really don't think you can beat Tama River paper. You've got the 2 different weights here. They perform so well. Ink just sits on the top, it doesn't absorb in, so there's so little feather and bleed. You do get ghosting, but everything shows up, sheen, and the colours look fairly good, if a little bit dull at times. But for the most part, this is obviously one of the highly recommended papers and probably 3rd on my list. 2nd on my list is the, just trying to find the sample here, is the Optik paper. Nice weight, nice white paper, and widely available, affordable, and colours look brilliant. The performance is brilliant. I really don't think this paper gets enough attention. It should be held up there with the best paper on the market. But my top pick is Apica. Now, it's not perfect, but it could be a little bit sheenier, but the way this paper performs, how available it is, how affordable this paper is, this has to be right at the top. It's nice and smooth, but you don't get the catching issues, like the hard starting issues you do sometimes on Fontaine and Maruman paper. It's just beautiful Japanese paper. They know what they're doing, and the performance is absolutely outstanding. So those are my top 3 picks. Now, I have 2 other recommended that I haven't covered here today, just quickly while I'm here. So, Muji. Now, Muji is a Japanese chain of stores. They make notebooks and all of that sort of stuff. And another Japanese chain store is Daiso. Now, these both produce very affordable notebooks, and for the most part, they are quite fountain pen friendly. The inks respond well, but what's great about them is the fact that they are, as I said, primarily fountain pen friendly, but super affordable and widely available through the chains. So if you are on a budget, check out Muji notebooks and check out the notebooks from Daiso. But anyway, this was my overall sort of paper review. I know it was a long one, but I hope you found it interesting. Hope you found the video useful. If you've got any questions about any of the paper, please feel free to ask. If you've got questions about other sorts of paper, feel free to ask. I didn't cover all the paper in my collection, in my my notebook library, of course, but these are the ones I thought should be covered. And yeah, I hope you found it useful. If you did, subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications button to stay up to date with the videos that I produce, and please feel free to get in touch using any of the platforms listed below. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at @the_offstage_me. You can contact me on my my blog or via email or in any of my videos here. It's all listed down below. If you've got products you think I should be looking at, including other brands of paper that I might not have covered here, get in touch and let me know. Or if there's a way you'd like to support the channel by sponsoring a review or providing a product for review or trial or whatever, get in touch and let's see what we can do. In the meantime, enjoy your pens, enjoy your paper, and I'll talk to you later.